Hello and welcome to another episode of Laptop Retrospective. This is Think Design Stories. In this series, we will be going behind the scenes on one of the most iconic laptop brands ever conceived and is still going strong. Today I am joined by David Hill, who started with IBM in 1985 and was with them until May 2005 when the IBM ThinkPad division was purchased by Lenovo. Since then, David has held several positions between those two companies, including the Executive Director of Design, the Vice President of Corporate Identity and Design, and the Chief Design Officer and Vice President of Experience Design. When it comes to ThinkPads, there are few people that know more than he does. One device that was made in the year 2000 that brings up a lot of questions is, of course, the IBM TransNote.
Yes.
And it stands kind of head and shoulders as being one of the few and only devices that ever looked like this.
Yes. I can't believe you have one of those.
Yeah, I can't believe it either.
I don't know. I don't want to hear the story of how you get that. There's no telling.
Yeah, I had quite a bit of help tracking one of those down, but it's an interesting device. No one's ever tried to make anything since like it. They probably don't have to because the technology has moved on.
Yes.
But from what I understand, you know a little bit of the history of the TransNote and perhaps how it came into being and some of the key players that were working on it. And I was wondering if you wouldn't mind sharing a bit about what you know about it.
Sure. It was a product of IBM Research initially, and very much, and John Caritas was very deeply involved with it. There was a product made by Cross, the pen company, called the CrossPad, and they were working with IBM to basically make this thing. And the idea was you could write on it with this special pen and special paper, and it would turn it into basically a JPEG. And Caritas thought that there was a bigger play to link that specifically to a ThinkPad. So you would have, because the CrossPad was basically useless without a computer. You would have to go back home or transfer the files and such. So he had this concept of just a folio that would have a very thin ThinkPad and then this pad of paper. And he said, it's not so different from what somebody might carry to a meeting. And at the time, some people carried Franklin planners, or those, if you remember those things. Some people carried kind of thick notebooks and things, real notebooks, not computers, to meetings. So he thought, joining these things together somehow would be an interesting product. And so there were study models made and prototyping and such, and eventually it got into the product roadmap. And I will tell you, it's probably the most frustrating device that has probably ever been designed and engineered, because it did so many different things, and there were so many problems that had to be solved. You would solve like one problem and you go, that fixed that. And then there'd be like 6 new ones that cropped up. And 3 of them would be because of what you just did to fix the other problem. It was like squeezing a balloon and it popped out somewhere else.
Right.
And so it was extremely complicated to design. And then it had to be, there were a lot of criticisms about, you unfold this thing as ginormous. How are you going to use this on an airplane? And at the time, I had airplane seats in the design studio that I had bought. So you could actually sit on an airplane and simulate using a product. because at the time that was like that was an important thing to know if you could open it or how you could use it and such. And so it was a real problem. And Caritas came up with this idea of these shifting top bottom thing. I forget. I think it was a name for it. I can't remember anymore. But
Yeah.
you could change the stack
Yeah.
such
Because,
that the tablet, like that,
yep.
and then you could do it the other way, so that the writing tablet was on the top also.
Yep. Flip that
Yeah,
over, and there you go.
like that. Yeah, that's it. And so that was clever. There were a lot of clever things that came out of it. The ThinkPad itself was very, very thin at the
Yes.
time, kind of impressive. I mean, the paper had to be designed. Everything was designed, had its own user interface and such. And it was an interesting demonstration of technology and problem solving and all this. And the market went, or a lot of the industry reviewers went gaga over this thing because it was new and broke a mold and handwriting and all this. But there were also a lot of misconceptions. A lot of people thought you just wrote in handwriting on it and it turned it into typography, which it didn't do, and such. And then it was much bigger, I think, than people really anticipated in terms of the thickness and the overall bulk of it. But IBM had geared up. I mean, they were ready to make left-handed versions, right-handed versions,
Hmm.
and versions made out of leather, and versions made out of. I think the one you have is the synthetic material.
It,
I don't think they ever made the leather one.
yeah, it's hard to tell.
Yeah,
It definitely looks the part.
yeah, but they were geared up to make almost anything you could possibly imagine. They thought this was going to be the next big thing, and it kind of turned out to be a dud. And I think really the lesson learned there is it's a little bit of the chitty chitty bang bang of computers. It's a car, it's a boat, it's an airplane, and
Hmm.
it doesn't really do any of those very well. It's got a lot of compromises, but it plowed a lot of new territory in terms of handwriting capture and some of the hinge details for the way the screen folded out. It also spawned the idea of the third button for scrolling, which is located between the right and left hand click buttons,
Hmm.
because there was no palm rest, so there was no place to put the scrolling button. And I was possessed with retaining the scrolling button. And so I came up with this idea of a blade, which is located between the two buttons. And you can use that for scrolling. And then that eventually turned into the keystone shape that you would see today on a ThinkPad. So there's a lot of things that came out of it, but from a market perspective, it was not pretty.
Yeah, it tried to do an awful lot. You can tell by looking at it. And
Yes.
I, at one point, attempted to disassemble parts of it just to,
Oh my, to look at it.
yeah, to look at it and to try and address. There's a bit of a flaky display cable, so the display on
Ah,
this one kind of goes in and out. And just trying to disassemble it and see in the hardware maintenance manual how this all went together. When you said like how challenging it would have been to design, I wholeheartedly believe you.
oh yeah.
Just seeing like how many screws and fasteners and screw covers
It was
and
unbelievable.
like,
Even the pen, the pen. I mean, there were countless evenings of phone calls about the pen because the pen was too big and it made the whole product bigger, and then there wasn't a place to put it.
yeah,
And yeah, I mean, it's a big boy pen,
yep, it's
and
not small.
no, but it was like a snowball of these challenges. It was, and they were difficult, but I can remember being on these calls and be like, oh my gosh, okay, it was time for the TransNote update. Oh my goodness, this is going to be another hour. Uh, but but there were a lot of good lessons learned. Also, there was a lot more, I would say, rigor put into the process to determine what things go from research into actual products.
Mm.
Because there were some loose ends, let's say, that weren't really tied down before it made it into plan. It was aggressive. I mean, it was there's some bold moves,
Yeah.
and sometimes that's what it takes to do something new. It's
Hmm.
just I think it was just too complicated, and a lot changed shortly after there with more tablet type devices with touch and things.
Yeah, it's certainly the product of its era in a lot
Mhm.
of ways because if you wanted all of those things and you try to cram them into one product, it would be pretty hard for it to look like anything else. But what it
No,
is,
it'd be almost impossible. And the cross pad itself was actually pretty big.
yeah, it's like the size of the whole device.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how long the cross pad was actually sold. I
It
think I
was a
saw it.
pretty short amount of time.
Yes, I think it was in one of in that Sky Mall magazine for a while, you know. But that in itself was big,
Hmm.
and then you combine that with this ThinkPad that John Caritas, bless his heart, steamrollered that thing into the thinnest thing imaginable. I mean,
Yeah.
he was all over that thing.
Hmm.
It was fascinating to watch the problem solving and such, but it was like I said, it was like whack-a-mole. You 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 stop one of these disasters and three more would pop up. Oh my gosh.
So from the challenges that you do remember with this thing, was there one that really stuck out as being like the most difficult to solve? Or do they all kind of blur together?
Yeah, I don't know. There's so many of them. The thing about it being really big on a table and then the fold thing that went under it, and that was, there were pieces of folded paper that were being used to show this. And it all looked like, wow, that's a cool idea. And then the pen that wouldn't fit. So we had to make the shape that profiles. So it's not really a rectangle. It has the little shape in it. That was my idea because I said, we just got to give up. The pen's not going to fit in there. It's just, we can barely put a computer in there. So we're just going to have to make a shape that encapsulates the pen, but sort of highlights it in a way. It'll have a distinctive profile.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
that's the
the
shape. Yeah, that was my idea to hide the pen in there.
I mean, I
Um,
don't know where else you were going to put it because there's no room in the computer to like garage it or
well,
anything
there
like
were
we do
things
today.
about like a little tube you just stick it in, stuck on the side of it, and I thought, well, that's just going to get broken off or lost, or elastic band the like the elastic in your underwear or something. We can't do that. This is a
No.
ThinkPad, for gosh sakes.
Yeah, it's
You
like
know,
you need to have a little bit of business decorum and having that thing just hang out
yes,
there.
it
It's
can't
not
be
going to
some
do it.
elastic.
Yeah.
It's a little sheath or something on the outside of it. Mm. But yeah, there were many of these problems. Like I said, the one about the scrolling thing. A lot of people just want to throw that overboard. It does not have a think light
No.
because there's really no easy way to do it. I had proposed putting the light in the bottom edge of the display, but then there's a lot of situations where the bottom edge of the display is actually
Please.
all the way down,
Well, yeah, and all
and
sorts of different other orientations.
or it would
So,
shine in your face. And so I thought
yeah.
that's unfortunate because the think light is very useful.
Hmm.
So you had to kind of turn a blind eye to some of those things to just say, well, we're just gonna have to give up. We're not gonna be able to do it. Yeah, even the material, the cover, countless prototypes of that. And then
I
the
can
right-handed versus left-handed.
I can only imagine the conversations about market share of
Oh
lefties.
yeah. So left-handed people aren't gonna buy this. Is that it?
Yeah. No, that's like, well, how many of them, you know, are customers for this anyway?
Yeah, I
One
mean,
has to wonder.
you can imagine these crazy meetings. It basically turned out that, well, it didn't matter if you're right or left-handed. Nobody really wanted it. When when they learned more about it, when they saw it in person, and the price tag was pretty high.
Hmm.
I don't remember what it was anymore, but I know it was certainly not cheap.
Hmm.
Uh, and you know, it uh, it certainly got a lot of attention.
Yeah.
The PR factor for it was very significant.
And very, very unique machine. I can't think
Oh,
of anything
yeah.
that even like out of the history of laptop development, it probably has the most unique shape, profile, set of features. Like
Yeah.
find a more unique and eclectic machine. Uh,
It would be hard to top it.
yeah,
It
absolutely.
really would. And now there's really no need for it at all. Unlike regular ThinkPad. Regular ThinkPad, I mean, good grief. It would be hard to carry on a day without having a ThinkPad, a traditional laptop. A
Yeah,
laptop is so well thought out and tested. It's just super simple. And that's sort of the antithesis of a TransNote. But yeah, I kind of have a love-hate relationship with that thing.
I understand.
Yeah, I mean, it was entertaining, and you can sharpen your pencil trying to think of ways to solve problems. But eventually, it was kind of like, wow, should we really make this? Well, we did.